Well, first we dedicate quite a bit of resources to training of both prosecutors and law enforcement in Greene County in the investigation of these cases because they are so difficult to prove. Our numbers correspond really with the cities. I showed 12 arrests. They submitted 15 cases that meet the definition of forcible rape to our office in 2012. Of those, we charged 7, and 8 had to be refused because of a lack of corroborating evidence. The thing about sex offenders, particularly rapists, is they are like predators. They choose their prey, and these crimes rarely occur in front of other people. And so you have to look for other types of corroborating evidence because you're not going to have eyewitnesses other than the victim to the crime. And many times there's insufficient corroborating evidence to charge a case. There are a number of dynamics at play there. One, you have to look for corroborating evidence because usually there's only 2 people present when this occurs. And the other thing is not all victims wish to proceed with the prosecution for various different reasons. An example is we had a case, a domestic assault combined with a forcible rape case recently here in Greene County, in which he recently pled guilty to a domestic assault in the 2nd degree. And the reason the rape was no longer with it is the victim who fled to a shelter was not available to us at the time of preliminary hearing. So the rape counts didn't get bound over, but because we had independent corroborating evidence of the assault, we were able to proceed with the felony assault. We found her recently, we're prepared to go to trial, and on the eve of that trial, the defendant pled guilty. His sentencing is still to come, but under that plea agreement, we'll be seeking 7 years in the Department of Corrections for that assault. And so while that rape didn't get prosecuted, in the end, that's a success story. We were able to go forward without the victim, then ultimately find her and be successful in the domestic assault. In another recent case, by example, a case that we tried to a jury, initially the defendant to the police claimed he didn't know the victim. Then he claimed he didn't know her that well as to have had sex with her. Then, of course, when the DNA came back and showed his sperm, he went with the defense of prostitution and consent. And unfortunately, because he had chosen a victim who had some vulnerabilities and some credibility issues, the jury found that there wasn't enough, and they entered an acquittal. And that illustrates the difficulty that these cases pose, because these predators, they often prey at people who are vulnerable for one reason or another, either a personal situation or through alcohol use on that night or drug use. There are many, many factors that make these cases difficult.
And do you see a lot of that where you go in and you say, hey, we know we're not going to have the evidence to be able to convict this person of a rape, but something else happened on that night that we can charge this person with and go forward with that?
It depends. We're always looking for those kinds of cases that we can make on what we call an evidence-based prosecution that wouldn't require the victim to participate if for some reason she doesn't want to. The ability to do that, of course, is case dependent, and I couldn't tell you that we're regularly able to do that, but that's always something we're looking to be able to do.
Do you think that the numbers we're looking at here with the arrests and with the cases that went forward that you were telling me about, do they tell the full picture? Or do they show the full picture, I should say?
I think they illustrate clearly the difficulty in both the law enforcement response to rape cases, the victim's response to rape cases, and prosecuting rape cases. Because it is such an intimate crime, it is extremely difficult to both investigate and to prosecute.
So, bottom line, are most perpetrators of rape in Greene County getting the justice they deserve?
Absolutely not. Nationwide, they're not. We know that based on, 1, the numbers that don't go reported, and 2, the difficulty in proving an allegation, and the extreme difficulty on the victim of choosing to go forward with a prosecution.
So what can you and others do better?
Well, as I said, we've invested quite a bit in training, and we continue to look at better ways to prosecute these cases. One issue we have is the definition, for example, of forcible compulsion is physical force that overcomes reasonable resistance, implying an obligation of the victim to resist. But what we know as we've gone forward about the psychology of rape is that many times, for various reasons, the victim who finds herself in what is a life-threatening situation will submit to the rapist because they believe that is their best chance of survival. And of course that wouldn't meet the definition of forcible rape. Now, it still might be a sexual assault, which would be sexual intercourse without consent. But that's another one of the battles we have is simply the statutory language that must be met to achieve a conviction.